shop, and it needs a little bit of help in the electrical department. Now, this particular Jeep didn't even come with air conditioning, no power door locks, no power windows. This is the quintessential basic vehicle when it comes to electrical wiring. Now, the owner's gone ahead and added some LED lights, auxiliary driving lights, a winch, more lights. So basically, we need to help out the electrical system in this vehicle. Okay, so what we're going to be doing today is the big three. Now, before you put in a big battery, high output alternator, you need to make sure that the foundation of the electrical system is going to keep up with everything, which is the wiring. There's no point putting a high output alternator if the wiring can't keep up with the amperage. Now, you guys with trucks, anything with basically a body on frame, so you old big body muscle car guys, truck guys, SUV guys, you should be paying attention to this video. Think about it. The way most of these vehicles are grounded is it's just a thin piece of wire. And what they're relying on is the motor being mounted to the frame. Now, if you think about it, you have motor mounts. That has a rubber bushing in between, and you're asking that to ground it properly. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting welding on studs to the frame and onto the firewall to the negative terminal. So we're going to head down to 6 feet under and go ahead and do this. All right, so here we are. We got to weld this bolt in. So what we're going to do is we're going to weld this one on top of the frame, and then we're going to weld another bolt right to the firewall. Right. Before we even start welding, we have to make sure we have a nice clean surface. So we're going to take our grinder to it and clean it off. Alright, so for our next grounding point, we've decided to go up here on the firewall. So what it's actually going to allow us to do is that first bolt that we're going to weld on is going to tie into here. And then from here on the firewall, it's going to tie back onto the negative terminal. Okay, so we're about to weld the hardware onto the frame. Couple things, we've turned the wheel out of the way to give Dallas more room to work on it. Disconnecting the negative terminal off the vehicle because we don't want to be surging the vehicle electronics with all this energy coming from the welder. So we've gone ahead and disconnected the negative terminal just to be safe. Everything's clean. We also made sure that our grounding point from the welder is as close to the frame where we're welding as much as possible. So we're going to go ahead and give Dallas some room. He's going to weld this thing up. Alright, we got our stud now welded onto the firewall, and we're ready to bring this thing back to the install shop. And made my wiring. It's all cut to length for this vehicle. Now, I know I said big three, but I have 4 wires. This 4th wire here is going to go into the alternator, and then we have one for the motor, one for the chassis, and then one for the battery, all tying together. Now, before I even get started working on the vehicle, we have to go ahead and disconnect the negative terminal. Now, you saw us weld on the studs before. Now we're going to start using them. Gone ahead and put a washer on one side and a washer on the other, and then we just nutted on all our wires afterwards. So these are all ready to go. They're all set to length. So now I'm going to start hooking them up to the vehicle itself. Okay, so let's go ahead and hook up the frame. I'm going to put our washer on first. Now also, after you've welded on the stud, make sure that you've cleaned out any slag. If there's any slag in these threads, you're going to have a hard time putting the nut on. Now, if you notice, I've also loomed up the wire as well and put tape on it, and I've also soldered the connections on the gold-plated ring with terminals, just to make sure we have a nice quality product at the end of the day. Now, in an application like this, because it is an off-road vehicle, all this is bare metal. Now, all the connections that need to be made are tight against each other. But to help make the connection last longer, I'm going to go ahead and hit it with a light coat of clear coat just to help protect it. Dielectric grease would work too in this application, but given this an off-road vehicle, dielectric grease is going to collect a lot of dirt, so I'm just going to hit it with paint. I'm going to use dielectric grease everywhere else on the build though. Now we're going to hook up the motor. Now this vehicle didn't have air conditioning, which is great. So we have right here is a place to put some sort of belt-driven accessory, but now we just have the threads now. Now this is a great point to ground the motor because this is bolted directly up to, looks like the block, and this is going to give us a good point to ground out the motor. Easier starting, better spark plug firing, just all that kind of good stuff. Now, when you're going to pick threads on a motor, don't pick any bolt. Pick something empty like this. Don't use your thermostat housing, don't use a valve cover bolt because then you're probably going to run into leaking issues. So again, we're going to put our washer down first. And this way it's going to be easier if you do it all at the same time. So washer through the terminal. I did make this ground kind of long. I just wanted to run more with the factory lines to make it look a little bit neater. And we're going to go ahead and secure it right here. This is aluminum, so don't over tighten it. Just nice and snug. Okay, so we're going to be upgrading the alternator wire, but the actual shrouding around is just too thin. So I have to go ahead and make this a little bit bigger by just cutting out this material. Okay, now to finalize up the alternator connection, the nice thing is the customer has a dual post battery. Now, not every battery has this. This is typically found in a GM application. But you have your original top post over here, but we have these nice side posts over here. So we're going to use this one instead, and just, we're not going to mess around with this stuff that's already been done before. So you can get these at your local install shop. They'll sell this to you, or we can provide it for you if we're doing the install. So we put that on. Now it's got another stud at the end. And then we put a ring terminal in there that's already hooked up to the alternator, and then you can go ahead and then just attach this on. All right, so you can see that we've all finished up now. Taped up this wire up here. It's all zap strapped and run along all the factory wiring. Now you can see on this vehicle, it actually does have grounding straps on it, but you can see that the wires, they've been submerged a couple times, and the vehicle is just old, and the wiring is just crusty. And do you really want old, crusty wiring in your vehicle? Probably not. You can see that the new wiring is significantly thicker. Here's the old wire, old ground. We don't take off the grounds, we just maintain them because electricity just takes the least path of resistance, so we just leave them there just in case. But again, this is thin. You see how low that is compared to this place over here? So if they do submerge the vehicle, it has a higher chance of not being contaminated by anything because it sits up higher here. So you can see here you got old and busted, new hotness. Old and busted, new hotness.